update and a report from Leon Frazier, who is with the Use of Force Research Institute. Just to give you a little background, about a couple of months ago, we had some of the former officers of the Macon Police Department in the studio. Some of them we had with us via the telephone, and we all conferenced in, and we talked about some of the allegations and the against the Macon Police Department with respect to unfair treatment to some of our former black officers as well as some of our female officers. Sometimes after that, we had a conversation on air with Mr. Frazier, who told us that he has spent some months just researching the Macon Police Department, not just taking the words of folk, but going and doing in-depth research, and he promised that he would come back to us and share his findings with us, and today is the day. And with all that said, good morning, Mr. Frazier.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
I am super fine for an old fella.
You looking mighty spiffy.
We are glad to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, sir.
And first of all, give us a little background, Mr. Frazier, about your institute, what you do, your background, and then we'll fast forward as to how we got where we are today.
Okay, very good. I'm a country boy, born and raised in Sumter County, Alabama, over in Livingston. Came up when little black boys had to stand back and be cool and quiet. Tried to want to be somebody. My grandmother constantly told me that I couldn't be a police officer because I was black. White folk were the police. She told me I couldn't be a Greyhound bus driver because white folk drove buses. And as a little boy, that angered me, and I couldn't figure out why the best person in my life, the best mentor I had, was constantly shooting down my dreams. Mm-hmm. And I went on through school, decided that Alabama, just was too much for me. I had to bail up out of Alabama where mm-hmm. black folks couldn't be stuff. So I joined the Air Force as soon as I got a chance mm-hmm. and learned that there was a world beyond Livingston, Alabama. Went in the Air Force, traveled around overseas a bit, in the States a bit, and messed around at 20 and discovered that there were some black men out there like King and Malcolm and all of those people who were standing tall. And they wasn't bowing and scraping to white folk and giving up their rights and dignity to try to please nobody. Mm-hmm, and I said, hot diggity dog, that's the kind of man I want to be. So I went besides myself. I started joining civil rights organizations, NAACP, Congress on Racial Equality, and messed around there and decided I really wanted to be the police. Mm-hmm. My grandmama said that it couldn't be done, but I knew that I could do what I wanted to do because I heard black men saying that you could do those things. Yeah. And so I went and joined Dayton, Ohio Police Department. Mm-hmm. They tried their damnedest to keep me out because I had been arrested in civil rights demonstrations and etc. But I wouldn't settle for it. I fought my way into that police department, stayed there for 13 years, and then decided that being a police officer just wasn't good enough. I needed to be the chief. And I wanted to show my grandmama in her grave that I could go on to be the best of the police. So I bailed out of Dayton Police Department with the Jefferson Township Police Department as Chief of Police and spent 14 years then being Chiefs of Police in different jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. And while there, I really learned what the criminal justice system was about. And I realized that the criminal justice system is just killing black people softly. You're falling apart, your communities are torn apart, and you're just crumbling softly, and you don't even know what's happening to you. And I decided, why don't you take this experience you have in law enforcement as a chief of police, and why don't you break out the criminal justice system for what it is, and then why don't you take all of the problems that black and poor whites and other downtrodden people have with the police department and apply that wealth of knowledge to helping them to help themselves, mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. thus making a better community. So in 1995, when I retired, I started the Use of Force Research Institute. And I started to help people, number one, to understand the law, And because this system has a doctrine that ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Right.
The more ignorant we keep you, the more harm we can do to you. So I believe that everybody ought to be taught the letter of the law. They ought to be taught the spirit of the law. And then all of their rights ought to be protected, not only from police now, because I ain't just a police watcher, but lawyers are doing people in too. And judges are doing people in too. And I know how they are doing it too. So my thing is to investigate the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then to report on the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Now let me ask you this, and I wanted to ask you this before. How did you come up with use of force in terms of the name of your institute?
Well, I used to watch officers do so much damage to people, by messing over them and beating on them, and a lot of black people look at police brutality only as an officer slapping you upside your head. But see, police brutality can be broke down in a much more simpler form than that. It can be oral and verbal brutality. It can be psychological brutality. And then it can be the physical stuff that most people can see. And that's where we was catching most of the heck in being brutalized by police. Now, that's not all the police, because I want to make it plain and clear. The majority of the police out there are good, law-abiding, dedicated public servants. 60% of them, I have a theory called 60-20-20 scale theory. 60% of your police officers out there, they love, trust, and respect themselves, and they also love, trust, and respect people. They're out there to help people.